8 months is a long time to disappear in sports. Long enough for fans to move on. Long enough for the noise to fade. Long enough for people to quietly start wondering if you'll ever look the same again. That's usually how it goes. Players come back slower. Careful. A little unsure. They take a few games just to look normal again. But Caitlin Clark didn't come back like that. She walked into her first game off the bench. And within seconds, something felt off. Not because she looked rusty. Because she didn't. Team USA was struggling before she checked in. The offense looked stuck, like nobody could figure out how to break through Senegal's pressure. Passes were getting picked off, spacing looked awkward, and every possession felt heavier than the last. It wasn't panic yet, but it was getting close. Then Clark stepped on the floor. No build-up. No adjustment period. First touch. She's already reading the defense. First shot. Deep three. Good. And just like that, the entire pace of the game shifted. It didn't feel like someone easing back into rhythm. It felt like someone who already knew exactly what was about to happen before it did. The same defense that had been suffocating everyone else suddenly looked a step behind. Passing lanes opened that weren't there before. Transition plays started forming out of nowhere. She wasn't reacting. She was controlling everything. In just 19 minutes, she put up 17 points and 12 assists. And the craziest part? 0 turnovers. Not one mistake. After 8 months away. That's not normal. That's not even expected from players in mid-season form, let alone someone coming straight out of rehab. And if you've been watching basketball for a while, you already know how rare that kind of control is. It's the type of performance that makes you pause for a second and think, wait, did that just happen? And honestly, if you're into stories like this, where players don't just come back, but completely flip expectations, this is exactly the kind of thing worth sticking around for, because what followed somehow got even more out of control. Because that stat line. That wasn't the headline. The records were. One game like that should have been the peak. That's how it usually works. A big return, a standout performance, headlines everywhere. And then things settle down. Players cool off, defenses adjust, reality kicks back in. But that's not what happened here. Because the next game came, and she did it again. And then somehow even better. Caitlin Clark didn't just have a great return. She turned the entire tournament into her personal highlight reel. Germany tried to slow the pace. Italy focused on shutting down transition. Spain came in with one of the most disciplined defensive systems in international basketball. None of it mattered. Every game followed the same pattern. Teams would come in with a plan. And within minutes, that plan started falling apart. Not because they weren't prepared. Because she was always one step ahead. The passes got sharper. The reads got faster. The confidence. It never dipped. And while everyone kept waiting for her to finally hit a wall, it never came. Think about that for a second. 5 games. 7 days. After 8 months without real competition. That's the kind of schedule that drains even fully conditioned athletes. By Game 3, fatigue should have shown up. By Game 4, something should have slipped. But nothing did. Instead, the numbers kept stacking. By the end of the tournament, she had broken 14 different records. 14. Not just team records. Not just women's records. All-time international records. Some of them weren't even things people were tracking before, until she pushed them past the point where they couldn't be ignored anymore. And when it was all over, there wasn't even a conversation about who the best player was. She walked away with the MVP. The youngest ever. No debate. No controversy. No feel-good comeback narrative. Just dominance. The kind that forces people to completely rethink what they just watched. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. Not after that much time away. Not against that level of competition. Not in that kind of schedule. And yet, it did. But while all of this was happening, while records were falling and the spotlight kept getting brighter, there was one detail in the background that people couldn't ignore. Because someone who was supposed to be part of this story wasn't there at all. There was one name people expected to see at that tournament. And it wasn't on the roster. Aya Wilson. No injury report. No official explanation. No clear reason. She just wasn't there. At first, it felt like a small detail. Something people would question for a moment and then move past once the game started. But as Caitlin Clark kept dominating, that absence started to feel louder. Because this wasn't just any player missing. This was a 3-time MVP. One of the most decorated players in the game. Someone who, not long ago, was seen as the clear face of women's basketball. And now, the biggest tournament moment of the year was happening without her. Naturally, people started asking questions. Was it a roster decision? Something behind the scenes? A shift in direction? No one had a clear answer. But then, she spoke. And in one sentence, the entire conversation changed. Clark got lucky I wasn't there. That line spread fast. Because it didn't sound like analysis. It didn't sound like support. It sounded personal. And the timing made it hit even harder. While Clark was out there breaking records, 14 of them, going undefeated and walking away with MVP, Wilson was watching from home. So when people heard that comment, it didn't land as confidence. It landed as tension. And once people started looking closer, they realized something else. This wasn't the first time. Every time Clark hit a milestone, whether it was a major award, a headline, or a big career moment, there always seemed to be a reaction. Not always direct. Not always loud. But consistent enough that it started to form a pattern. And patterns are hard to ignore once you see them. Because at some point, it stops looking like coincidence. And starts feeling like something deeper. But here's where the story takes a turn most people didn't expect. Because this wasn't just about competition anymore. It was about something much bigger. Something happening behind the scenes, where the real power decisions get made. While all of this was unfolding on the court, something even bigger was happening off it. Not in interviews, not in press conferences, but in boardrooms. Because companies don't react to hype. They react to numbers. And right now, every signal was pointing in one direction. Caitlin Clark. Behind the scenes, Nike wasn't just supporting her. They were going all in. This wasn't a normal signature shoe rollout. This was the kind of launch you reserve for once-in-a-generation athletes. Full-scale campaigns, design collaborations, heavy investment across every platform. The kind of push that doesn't just promote a player. It builds a brand around them. And when you look at how rarely companies make moves like that, it tells you everything. Because Nike isn't guessing. They're looking at engagement, viewership, sales projections, real data. And that data was making one thing clear. Clark wasn't just performing. She was pulling the audience with her. Every game, more eyes. Every highlight, more traction. Every appearance, more attention. She wasn't just part of the conversation anymore. She was becoming the center of it. And then there was the contrast. Because at the same time, Aya Wilson's shoe line wasn't getting that same energy. No major campaign. No aggressive push. Inventory sitting longer than expected. And that difference. That's not random. That's a shift. A shift in who the market is choosing to rally around. And whether people want to admit it or not. Moments like this matter just as much as what happens on the court. Because this is where influence is decided. This is where the future gets shaped. And right now, everything, from media to marketing, was starting to align in one direction. But here's what makes this even more interesting. Even with all that momentum, even with the records, the MVP, the attention, things still weren't fully clicking on the court. Not yet. Because there was one problem no one expected. And it had nothing to do with her performance. At first, it didn't make sense. Because when you looked at the numbers, Caitlin Clark was clearly dominating. But when you actually watched the games closely, something felt off. The offense looked slower than it should have been. Possessions dragged. The rhythm just wasn't there. And the weird part? It wasn't her. Her reads were still sharp. Her vision was still elite. Every time she had space to push, something good happened. But those moments felt limited. Like she was being held inside a system that didn't match how she plays. The coaching approach was built around balance. Everyone touches the ball. Everyone contributes. No single player takes over. On paper, that sounds perfect. In reality, it was doing the opposite of what this team needed. Because Clark's entire game is built on speed. Quick decisions. Fast breaks. Creating chaos before the defense can even react. And instead, she was being pulled into a slower half-court style that neutralized that advantage. It's like putting a race car in traffic. Technically, it still works. But you're not using it the way it was designed. And people started noticing. Especially after one moment that quietly went viral. After a historic performance, records broken, game completely controlled, the coach stepped into the press conference and talked about the team. Not the performance. Not the player who just changed the entire game. Just the idea that everyone should shine. And even avoided saying her name. That clip spread fast. Because it didn't feel like strategy. It felt like hesitation. Like the system wasn't ready to fully lean into what was clearly working. And when that kind of disconnect happens, it creates tension. Not loud, obvious tension. But the kind you can feel in how the game flows. Something wasn't aligned. And the longer it stayed that way, the more it stood out. Because everyone watching could see the same thing. If you just let her play freely, this could get out of control very quickly. And eventually, someone made that exact decision. The shift didn't come slowly. It happened in one move. New coach. New approach. First decision. Start Caitlin Clark. Second decision. Give her control. That was it. No complicated system tweaks. No gradual adjustment. Just trust her. And let the game open up. And instantly, everything looked different. The pace picked up. Spacing made sense. Players moved with purpose instead of hesitation. It didn't feel forced anymore. It flowed. From the very first possession you could see it. Clark was pushing the tempo before defenses could even set up. Teammates were running lanes naturally, not waiting for instructions. The offense finally looked like it matched the talent on the floor. And Italy felt it immediately. What was supposed to be a competitive game turned into a blowout. 34 points. Over before halftime. That's what happens when a system finally aligns with the player running it. But the most surprising moment didn't happen during the game. It happened after. The coach stepped up to the microphone and said it outright. The previous approach didn't work. That almost never happens. Coaches don't publicly admit that kind of thing. Not mid-tournament. Not on record. But this time, it was undeniable. Because the difference wasn't subtle. It was night and day. And just like that, the blueprint was clear. Put the ball in Clark's hands. Speed the game up. Build around her vision. Everything else falls into place. No debate. No overthinking. And once that switch was flipped, there was no going back. Because now, it wasn't just about winning games anymore. It was about realizing something bigger. Something that could change how the game itself is played. Once that adjustment was made, it didn't just fix a few plays. It changed the entire feeling of the team. The ball moved differently, players reacted faster, and for the first time in the tournament, everything looked natural. Not forced, not structured, not held back. Just flowing. And at the center of all of it was Caitlin Clark, doing what she does best. Reading the game like it's happening in slow motion while everyone else is still trying to catch up. What made it so different wasn't just the stats anymore. It was the way defenses started to break before anything even happened. Opponents weren't just reacting late. They were guessing, hesitating, second-guessing themselves. Because once a player starts making decisions that fast, the entire defensive system starts to feel unstable. One step too slow, one wrong read, and the play is already over. That's when you realize this isn't just about a hot streak or a strong comeback. This is about influence. Because when one player forces multiple teams to adjust their entire approach in real time, That's when the game starts bending around them. Coaches begin rethinking matchups. Teammates start adapting their movement instinctively. Even the pace of the game itself begins to shift. And that's exactly what was happening here. It wasn't loud. It wasn't announced. But you could see it. The three-guard lineups, the faster transitions, the spacing. It all started to feel like a preview of something bigger. Not just for this team, but for where basketball is heading next. And the strangest part? She was doing all of this right after coming back from 8 months away. No warm-up period. No slow build. Just straight into changing how the game is played. Which raises a bigger question that nobody really has an answer to yet. If this is what it looks like right now, what happens when she's fully in rhythm? Because here's the reality. The biggest moments haven't even happened yet. The signature shoe hasn't dropped. The full season is still ahead. The playoffs haven't even started. And somehow, it already feels like the ground is shifting. What you're watching isn't just a comeback. It's the beginning of something that could redefine the entire sport. And moments like this, they don't always look obvious while they're happening. Sometimes they just feel different. Faster. Sharper. A little harder to explain. Until one day, you look back and realize, that's when everything changed. So now the question is simple. When the next game tips off, and all eyes are on the court, are you watching the future unfold in real time? Or are you going to miss it while it's happening? And if you've made it this far, you already know. This story is far from over. So make sure you're here for the next chapter. Hit subscribe, drop a like if this caught your attention, and tell me in the comments. How far do you think she can actually take this? Because something tells me, we're only at the beginning.